Okay. Three, two, one, we are live. Hello,
Are you ready?
everyone.
How does the gameplay footage look?
The gameplay
Hello.
footage looks amazing. I'm not complaining.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone.
God, that was horrible.
This is Ursine Combo Lab Audio. I forgot to pull up the GIF. Um, Pretend that this is take one and we're gonna do take two. I know we're live right now, guys, but bear with me. This is my first time hosting.
Oh my God, how did I not get smooth there?
Yeah, you're good. Do we introduce ourselves or
No, not quite. Let me.
No, we just have to be
Okay, here we go.
disembodied
Take
voices.
two. Take two. Here we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Ursine Combo Lab Audio, Episode 9. Tonight, we're going to talk about a very dense topic in FGC, and I feel like one that has not been touched on particularly, and it is game theory of fighting games. Tonight, I'm joined by three lovely members of the FGC UCLA community. Feel free to introduce yourselves.
It's
Okay,
me, 3K. I
I'm
play
JoJo.
Uni.
I mostly play Plus R. I love Melty as well.
and I'm Norse. I mostly play Undernight and French bread games.
Oh my God, how did that fucking soul? Okay, I'm sorry about
Whoa, what?
that. Go on.
All right, cool. Yeah, now that everyone's introduced themselves, I do want to, before we get right into the nitty-gritty of our topic today, I do want to make a very special announcement. This is an exclusive announcement that has not been made yet anywhere except for basically right now. And as you guys might know in the chat, FGC UCLA Discord server recently reached 500 members. And to celebrate, we're going to be doing a raffle. We're going to be giving away three fighting games that are on Steam. Um, all three of them are going to be
Oh,
tiered. Like basically, each winner is going to be given a fighting game based on the tier, and that will be randomly chosen. The tiers, for example, would be like a $20 fighting game, a $30 fighting game, a $60 fighting game, or it could also be an indie game, a double A fighting game, and a triple A fighting game. Just to give an example, like this has not been fully fleshed out just yet, but the giveaway will happen, and there will be three winners, and each of these winners will be receiving a fighting game in the aforementioned tiers. And the formal announcement for this will be made this evening after the episode, so I'll make sure to get that out before I get to bed. But otherwise, let's go ahead and
Oh, he's
get
gone light.
started. You guys have
He's
been
gone light.
filled in on the exclusive FGC Silly News. Yeah, for real, Rig Jace. We're in here. All right, guys, so let's get started with our episode topic today. So, to kind of give some context into why I wanted to talk about this today, 3K and I had a very intriguing, interesting conversation last night about, like a lot of things really. But one of the things that stood out in our conversation was the idea of having like a very good concept, like a very good conception of how like fighting games work on the theory side of things. Because I feel like the game theory side of fighting games is not something that people really talk about too much. They talk more so about like how to leverage a character's set play or techniques and all of that. But not too many people really have like a lot of focus on concepts that are very important in other competitive fields such as playing poker or other kinds of games that involve heavily psychology. So I have here so I'm gonna briefly get out of this plus R window. Apologies, plus R fanatics. But
It's been
uh,
tragic.
I've got. Oh man, I can't. Uh, ooh, it disappeared. Why now? Why would it disappear now? All right, there we go. There we go. All right, I've got this Reddit thread here, guys. I know it's pretty small on your guys' end on the stream, but post the link in the chats for your convenience, for your accessing convenience. Um, this thread was a really interesting thread I found um, a couple months ago regarding game theory in CS:GO, and it's called Game Theory Optimal CS:GO Playing Perfect Counter-Strike. Now, most of this, interestingly, has quite literally nothing to do with Counter-Strike necessarily, and more so to do with poker, which actually I found very interesting. It just shows how much overlap there is across the multitudes of competitive games. But regardless, the gist of it is that there's this concept of having an optimal strategy going into it, but not using it because you end up getting more productivity out of exploiting the weaknesses of your opponent if you can find them. So the whole idea basically is to find out the weaknesses of your opponent as quickly as possible, have a strategy for that that allows you to do that, of course. And then as soon as those weaknesses are found, exploit them as much as you can in order to, beat them. In the context of fighting games, this would mean if your opponent, let's say, is weak to a very hard to block overhead, you would keep using that over and over because you know they're going to get hit every time, supposedly, right? And in that way, you would be able to beat them up 2-0 in the bracket. But of course, we can kind of dissect how valid of a strategy this would be in this podcast. So of course, you guys feel free to give your thoughts as we go along. But for now, I'm going to turn to our guest tonight. We've got 3K, Norse, and Jub. And you know, I don't really, in terms of my kind of hosting style, I don't necessarily favor an order. I would like for anyone who wants to speak just to, go ahead and say
Just
something.
hitting the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Get yourself out there.
indeed. So yeah, I've set the tone. I do want to, make sure the conversation is focused nonetheless. So let's go ahead and start with, let me first change back to plus R.
There was one thing I want to say right from the get-go.
Okay,
When you
sure.
did mention how like most of the post was about poker, and I think it's okay. Like, one factor is like as you mentioned, the overlap of like the competitive decision making. But I think another thing is another like possible factor is like the fact that generally like poker is a much more like established game compared to games like CS:GO or really just any video game. I mean,
Hmm.
poker's like existed for so much longer because it's a pretty simple card game.
Hmm.
So like the game had a lot more chance to develop, and it's had a lot more eyes on it and a lot more people to like. And I think the idea of like borrowing game theory from like other um like competitive fields is a really good idea for fighting games in general, just because like it's like that one quote. It's like, why make all the mistakes when you can let other people make them for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great way to, set the stage for what we're about to talk about.
No
And in
monkey.
fact, I would say that
Speaking of mistakes, pour
that's
one
funny.
out for monkey.
I actually have something to after hearing how you explain the post,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially it sounds like they're talking about two things. So game theory, the optimal play, and essentially how to bluff your opponent. Those are different things. They're two different things. So one thing is something you could program with an AI. The other is a strictly human thing. It only works against a human. Well,
Hmm.
technically, like it's a mind game. And that actually favors not being optimal in order to win. And it's like a sort of I think like something you wouldn't expect to do, but it works because the opponent is human, and that is I guess that's something you will see recurring across almost any game that you play against another human opponent. In that the optimal strategy sometimes is not what you want to put out because uh, they might expect that and they might have like countermeasures ready for the optimal play. So you might not immediately go for the optimal play at at the beginning, and it might throw them off. It might give you an advantage. Uh, yeah, so I think they're different because fighting game optimally played is played by an AI that can react to everything in frame 1 frame, whereas like that's not really like what you see in tournament play. It's people playing. So you see people doing stuff that's not optimal and it's working. And to people who might be like purists for the theory, it's like frustrating to see these people doing like what looks really stupid and having it work. But I think that's what makes it really interesting, in my opinion.
I
Fighting game.
actually uh to expand on the point of like I guess like quote unquote theory purists
Hmm.
like complaining about like seemingly poor decisions. I feel like
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of shows like a lack of being able to like apply theory because I feel like when I was new, I used to sort of be the same way. I'd
Right,
like
right, right, yeah.
get really upset when I got hit by anything that like seemed like ridiculous or stupid.
Um,
But it's all really just two sides of the same coin. Because nothing is like perfectly reactable like by design. Otherwise, the games would sort of just like fall apart.
mhm.
Um, what was I gonna say?
Yeah, sorry to. I hope you're able to recall. But I did want to establish some further context. After both you guys made your comments, because I do want to make sure that topics that we talk about are focused. There's going to be a lot of overlap, though, trust me. So there will be plenty of chances for you to remember what you said or what you were going
Yeah,
to say.
I was going
Oh,
to
go
say
for it.
that
Yeah.
like exploiting the fact that this option is like theoretically suboptimal is like also an important for school.
Sorry.
You're fading out.
Yeah, Jeb,
You're
we couldn't
fading out.
catch what you
Did I cut
said.
up? Oh yeah, I was just saying that like exploiting the fact that an option like is suboptimal, like thus is not expected. It's like another side of the same coin.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's where the genius is. That's where
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful play can come out of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, you guys are like this is perfect, and we're gonna be getting more into this once we dive deeper into these subtopics. So to establish some context, further context for the audience, I know you guys probably don't want to read that full thread, right? So again, I'll provide another summary for the sake of what we're going to talk about right now. Um, the most important thing to take away from it is that there are supposedly two ways of playing a competitive game in game theory. There's, as both of you have alluded to, there's the side of playing optimally, which is supposedly a laid out strategy once the game has been solved enough. This is a strategy that anyone can perhaps do research on or like have knowledge on. That doesn't mean they're able to apply it, but it's like something that's a little more um, mm, eternal, supposedly. Like it's set in stone, so to speak. And then you have the exploitative strategy, which is something that you develop over, several years of experience. Um, it's something that's adaptable that you have based on the very opponent you're facing. And there's obviously overlap between these two like concepts or methods of playing a competitive game. But the best one for a particular situation is not constant. There's always a reason to believe that playing exploitatively is more optimal than playing optimally. But that's where we reach a kind of paradox that I want you guys to explore here. Are there any reasons where one might want to favor exploiting your opponent the best way possible over a very refined and clinical optimal strategy in terms of leveraging the every psychological edge that you can. So here, what I want you guys to focus on is the idea of playing exploitatively versus optimally, and then how that would relate to the potential psychological factors that you guys have already kind of touched on in your initial statements.
Yeah, I do think everyone does a little bit of both. It's a matter of when you make the switch. I'm curious, like, what you guys have to say about that. Does anyone want to say
Uh,
something?
I can give my thoughts at least if I were to enter a bracket, how to approach it. I think that this is pretty common for most people, but when you go into a tourney, a first to two isn't a lot of time to really adapt to your opponent. So most of the time, you're going to be starting on that quote unquote like clean, calculated play style that's just staying on layer one and doing various things. I
Yeah.
think it depends like where you start gathering information. A lot of the high level players in fighting games do pressure in a way that keeps them safe, but allows them to get information, and that's when they start playing more into the player habit side of things. But it's also like kind of tricky because like since it's the first to two, sometimes if your character's layer one is so strong, you don't really have to even go to like layer two or layer three generally. But it's like game dependent. But a lot of the times, like you stay on a layer one, you find what they're like not good at dealing with, and then you exploit that to try to win the set. It's a lot more clear in like a long set, but in a short term set, it's kind of it can feel kind of swingy because people can like do some pretty crazy stuff to try to quote unquote random you out.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, so what I like to do is like in a first to two, your life bar is basically your time limit for gathering information, right? And
Yes.
I tend to actually, if I can, I stretch out around as long as I can. At least the first one, it's safer there. Uh, and like until I'm like under half health and I already lost a round, then I start trying to push back a little bit more. But I tend to kind of go up the layers faster because I like to see how players react to that. And even in a first to two set, even if they never go past layer one, because I want to see a little more from that player before I leave them. Although it depends on, I think that it can depend on how you feel about or how safe you feel doing that and whether how serious you are as well. Because I think like when I was more serious about playing or when I really want to win, I don't care if I never explore past layer one. I will end them as quickly as possible. This is especially the
Yeah.
case like say you reset a bracket and you're in grand finals. You just want to end that as quickly as possible. So if you can run over them, do it. It just but if that's not the case, like I'm much earlier, I will try to probe as much as I can. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I I I really like to get as much from the really brief match, at least in tournament. If it's a player match, you get a lot more um a lot more time with them, so you can just kind of do whatever.
Yeah. I guess for that, I'd say there's two different modes of playing that I differ on. In casuals, I like doing what you were saying. Like, I don't really care if I win or lose, so I prefer just playing as much as possible to practice whatever I want to practice at that time or get used to situations. But in a tourney setting, I don't care if my opponent gets to play. Ideally, they never even get to play the game. Maybe that's like a mean way of saying it, but if I'm playing in
No,
a
that's
tournament,
smart way to put
I'm
it.
trying to win. And so that means, I'm not playing like, oh, I should do this because I want to learn the situation, or I'm not going to use this move because I want to figure out how to deal with my other tools and such. Like, no, like I will do all the cheese in the world if you can't deal with it.
Yeah,
And it's
no,
not going to look clean, but who cares if it looks clean if it gets you the win, right? Like,
right. So
in bracket, it doesn't matter really. Like, there's always like the preconception, like, oh, I want to be seen as a clean player, right? Because that's generally good. But there's plenty of styles of play that even if I don't personally like them and I think that they're messy, they are like effective in tournament.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, for me the reason I don't always just run over an opponent is because like tournament matches, to me at least, like people play differently, and
Hmm.
like there aren't many opportunities to get people into situations that you won't see often otherwise in that tournament setting. So I try to like create them if I feel I have room. So it's kind of like, I guess that's also a little mean to the person I'm fighting. If I think they're not going to defeat me quickly enough, then I think I have room to explore um, like what corner cases in a tournament setting, what they will do, since I like that. Although yeah, I take a risk by doing that, and I actually have lost because of choosing to do that. So it's a yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Actually, like speaking of like being mean, I was like, I don't know. In the past few days, I've been thinking, oh, okay, dropping the one frame link aside, I've been thinking the past few days, uh, about kind of like one mindset of like approaching like player versus opponent interactions. But I was like, what if I like try to view my opponent as like a lab rat? And which seems like really
As a
dehumanizing,
as a researcher, that's basically what I'm doing.
but it's like you hand your opponent a stimuli and you see how they react.
Uh-huh.
And um
Everyone's different too, so it's
yeah,
good
yeah.
when you
So it was
like
like sort of
experience.
alongside this this sort of duality of like I guess like trying to create chaos versus like overwhelming your opponent with something versus like trying or letting your opponent hang themselves and like commit suicide by doing nothing.
Hmm.
And so I was like on the doing nothing side of things, I was like, well, what if I like view my as like a stimuli? Because like I think one issue that I have is sometimes if I get like too nervous, I'll just like default to like dumb shit and pressure, and I'll be like, oh, I just need to like suffocate my opponent and not let them do things. But like if you try too hard to like let your opponent not do anything, it sort of like defeats the purpose because if they only have one correct option, they'll just like a smart person will just pick it all the time. And so it totally falls apart against like people who are actually like composed more than I am.
Hmm.
So it's like if I do nothing and let my opponent like try to react to me, or if I like see how my opponent reacts to me,
Hmm.
then not only do I like get to see how they act, but like I'm also expending less mental energy because I don't have to be the one like forcing the situation. I just let my opponent try to. Oh my god, that's beat me. I just let my opponent like try to do something.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, sorry, really quickly, 3K. I'll hear your thoughts in, but I do want to uh, quickly throw in some of the things that the commenters in the live chat have been saying, and perhaps you can use this to incorporate into what you're about to say. So we've got Rig Jace in the chat. Earlier, he pointed out that there was a time where a chess AI developed to fight against humans, but eventually Gary Kasparov managed to beat it by studying anti-computer chess. So it's like we can think of it as like metagaming. Like maybe it's not the proper way to play chess against a proper human opponent, but he figured out a strategy eventually to best an AI opponent, which is, you know, probably the best representation of what metagaming is. And then another thing he said in a follow-up was, so in a way mentioning optimality, I think he meant, but mentioning optimality, playing optimality, I can't read. So in a way, playing optimally seems impossible since every decision has an inherent weakness. Um, And then Moa Blob said, speaking of, would one way to think about playing optimally in fighting games be centered around making the best risk-reward decisions every time? And then Sarah commented, I think that would make someone too predictable. I think these guys are onto something here. What do you guys think about that? I mean, I know you guys already kind of mentioned your thoughts on that a bit, but is there anything that you'd like to expand upon, given
Oh,
what these
so
guys have said? So I'll let
um,
3K speak first since he was about
yeah,
to say
yeah.
something.
Yeah, so I was talking about it briefly before, but like in a tournament setting, if you ideally can just smother them, you should. But a lot of the times is that I don't smother them until like game two, if possible, because game one's all about information gathering. So like even though there's technically like optimal ways to end block strings or do stuff, sometimes I'll purposely leave gaps just to see if they're matching or not, or I'll leave certain strings like not particularly the most safe to see if they know certain knowledge checks in the matchup. I think a lot of the thing at like high level play is that people's pressure is structured around information gathering. So you see a lot of players will do like buttons, run up weight, or they'll do maybe like neutral jump, land, block to see how people react to their movement. And then they use that as a basis on how to play the rest of the game. In terms of always picking the optimal option, it's like technically yes, in a situation, if you do the thing with the best risk reward, just by the numbers, that would get you the most value. But as Sarah said, obviously we're human, so we're not going to do that all the time. And there is times where you have to purposely pick weaker options just because you haven't represented them yet, or because if you keep picking like the same one or two options, then it becomes very easy to shut down either your defense or your offense.
Yeah, excellent point. And actually, it's interesting you bring up like how people play with the intent of gathering information. I feel like that's exactly what Norse was getting at earlier, where playing exploitatively and optimally go hand in hand. You have the optimal strategy in order to form the game plan on the spot, on the fly, that you need in order to exploit your opponent's habits. And Jub Jub, feel free to expand upon that.
Oh yeah. So I was gonna say like, so you can say that there exists this like, risk reward matrix of like every option. Oh, like this this like happens about this much or this often and like does this much damage or like puts you in like this sort of like detrimental situation. But another thing you have to consider is that like expected value and stuff like that is always conditional on like the probability that the event will happen in the first place. And so that always fluctuates between player to player. So there actually exists no like optimal like risk matrix. It's pretty much like you have to form one, obviously, because even though it won't be perfect, just because like you can't just like go into the game being like, oh, all like the Cartesian, like, oh, I know nothing, I'm gonna like do my best to start from scratch. It's just impossible
Yeah.
unless it's able. um so like you assume that there exists some like um risk reward like matrix based on what you think like sensible people would do. But I mean, really, the real risk reward matrix that exists is like constantly changing all the time.
Any thoughts, Norse?
Yeah, so yeah, honestly, so I think like actually I was thinking about the predictable thing and exploiting a player's weakness. And what 3K mentioned earlier about like choosing to do slightly less optimal things to kind of look at what players do. Like I actually do this in Under Night where like at least with the character I play, there's a one of her normals has a very long cancel window. And I often when I fight people, I don't cancel that uh normally the first time and see if they mash. If they do mash, I'm like, oh, next time I present this to them, they're probably going to get 3k damage. So I'll just do that when it would kill. And it like almost always works. Uh, but there's something I kind of do want to talk about on whether how do I put this? Okay, so there are sometimes things that your opponent presents to you that is actually a habit or an exploitable weakness. And there are also times when they are kind of testing you too. And it's not actually like a weakness or a habit of theirs. They're consciously doing it to get you to bite next time. And how
Mm,
do you tell the difference between the two? Like, are they baiting you by pretending to have this weakness, or is it actually something you can take advantage of? And I think like it being able to tell the difference between the two uh, is pretty difficult depending on the player. And although I think there are some ways you can tell the difference. So like for example, the reaction time or the time it takes for a player to make a decision. That is one of the things that you can use. So if they're very quick about doing something, uh, usually if people are consciously doing something, there's a little more time or hesitation. There's usually a bit more delay before they commit to a decision if they're thinking about it consciously. It's very small, but it's there. I swear it's there. Uh, and but if it's immediate, then it's more likely, not always, but it's more likely to be a habit or something you can take advantage of.
That
Not
makes sense,
always.
actually.
Yeah,
I've never
yeah.
thought of that, and honestly, I could probably never bother to like actually keep track of that speed, but seems like a
Yeah,
really useful technique.
it is it's definitely that's usually how I what I use to kind of try to discern what is exploitable and what is not. Although what the first time is usually not enough. You have to see it a couple times before you really commit to using that information to to essentially make a read the opponent. So yeah, yeah, that's basically what I wanted to mention.
yeah, Norris, that was a terrific point, and that again, like this is what I like really like about like just competitive gaming in general, like the psychological components, where if you are like if you are a very good player, but you play as if you're like a little worse than you actually are, the information you might give your opponent who's looking for how to exploit you might be phony. It might be
Hmm.
unreliable. That's always been an interesting exploration topic, I think. Like, especially when you're reading books, right? The narrator, you're always at the mercy of the narrator for them to give you reliable information. I feel like it's exactly the same in the situation you discussed for like competitive games. In in poker, there's plenty of situations where like the commentators would say, "Oh, you should have folded," or or "Oh, you should have called." Like, but the person didn't, right? And the commentators are quick to ridicule them or say like, this is
Uh-huh.
they made a poor decision. Look at how much look at how much they had to give away." But
Yeah, that happens in fighting games too.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
considering that, like, this is gonna be a very important segue to what we're gonna talk about next. Um, if the result of making that supposedly poor decision or questionable, like decision because it was slightly like because you wanted to give your opponent like false information, right? Or a false sense of I know what this guy is doing and they
Mhm.
seem pretty bad. Um, if that results in not very severe consequences, it can be said that there's nothing to lose by doing so. And
Mhm.
what I want you guys to touch on next is that the idea of playing a character or having a playstyle where you go for the biggest punishments or the biggest like inflicting the largest amount of consequences on your opponent for every small decision that they made, whether it was actually a bad decision or what. So I'll give you an example to hopefully get the wheels of your brain going. So 3K in Uni, and I'm using this example only because he's here. Otherwise, I would use a different example. But 3K in Uni plays Byakuya. Byakuya is said to be a character where he's not very good in neutral, which is quite true. But all he needs is that one exchange in neutral that's successful in order to lead to um, very difficult to deal with Okizeme. And it's not because the Okizeme is like unreactable, hard to block. I mean, there are aspects of it that might be so, but it's particularly because the defender is required to make decisions that are inherently unfavorable for them. They heavily favor Byakuya. Not only do they heavily favor Byakuya, but the consequences quite literally lead to the same situation where you're heavily unfavored. It's the very same thing. And that kind of discomfort, it forces you to really consider, right? Because you don't want to be that person that's like, I made the bad decision, but I'm not gonna learn. I am insane, right? I mean, there is merit to being insane in a fighting game, right? Supposedly being insane. But point I'm making here is that eventually, I mean, you're just gonna get steamrolled because it's Byakuya. So is there something to be said about a high damage character having access to that and suddenly tipping the scales in their favor in terms of the psychological scale of a match? Or a character that has some similarly high reward off of a single exchange? Like it doesn't have to be high damage, it can be any kind of reward that suddenly, messes with the conditioning elements that, have been like had previously probably been taking place throughout the match.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably
All
go
why I
for it.
lose to Byakuya all the time because I let him do stuff. Because
right.
I don't steamroll him. I need to steam, but I don't
Yes.
want to. But yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
let me. So since this is my character, certified Byakuya expert here, but I just wanted to talk about something about like what people value in fighting games. So Godfrey kind of mentioned it, but what I value in fighting games is having a character that forces you to interact with me, usually in a negative light. So, like for example, in Rev 2, I think Raven is a really good example of this. So Raven, if you don't know, he has really oppressive Okizeme, good neutral buttons, and he forces the opponent to guess when they're on defense. Now, the thing about Raven that's different from other characters that Byakuya kind of just do is that Byakuya and Raven, compared to the rest of the cast, actually do pretty low damage. But the reason why you hear so many people complain about them is because of the psychological aspect of the fact that they have to deal with some type of guess, and if they're wrong, it leads back into the same situation. Like for example, like if Raven hits you with his 2K, he only gets like maybe like 50 damage from it. But because he got that 2K, now you have to guess in another setup, and I'm building meter for needle YRC during that, and you have to keep guessing. So because of that, people start feeling pressured to actually make some type of choice, which then leads into Raven Byakuya actually getting good damage.
Yeah,
Right, right.
50
so,
damage, but
yeah,
100 mental damage.
exactly. It's like
Yes.
it's not that much damage like per hit, but for example, when I go for the low, people always try to block the low the next time, and then the overhead is actually more damage. So then like
Uh-huh.
they block the low with Raven, and then they get hit by the low. I set the Oki up. I hit the high. I do 100 damage instead into the same situation, and it's all burst safe, by the way, because he needs it.
Yeah, so you guys, great points made. I just want to get this conversation back in focus. So, do you think these kinds of manipulations of reward really affect the conditioning element? Like, because you guys have been this entire time, right? I've conditioned you into saying that playing exploitatively is the best thing, right? But wouldn't these kinds of pre-rehearsed combos or, other forms of measured reward um, blatantly like create a very dishonest um, psychological context, right? For our purposes, right? We're talking about uh, trying to exploit your opponent at the maximum, right? But they would kind of be like you're manipulating them. You're telling them that they have to not make this poor decision again because they're gonna die for it. is that something that is worth considering, or should we just continue to build our game plans off of finding our opponent's habits?
I think it's like a mixture of the two. Like, for example, like for like characters like Byakuya or Raven in that aspect, they have non-interactive game plans. In some aspects, Byakuya is a lot more interactive because he's all strike throw. It's just that no one likes getting thrown into a web for a billion damage. But the thing about them is that they have non-interactive parts of their game plan where it's like, I don't care who you are. You could be Goichi, you could be Sonic Fox, you would have the best defense in the world. If I hit you, you have to guess. And I think that's a very powerful thing that some characters have, where it forces you to guess. And because of that non-interactive aspect, it opens up the other parts of their game plan. Now that you are so scared of getting hit by this one thing, you are now having to interact with my other tools that I normally aren't as strong, perhaps. One thing else I want to mention also that it's not just like characters who have these situations that force you to guess, but it could also just be characters that just, as you were mentioning before, just have high damage output. So like, I think a classic example like everyone sees like in Strive, for example, is like Nago or like Gold Lewis or in like the previous Guilty Gears like Slayer or like Ragna in previous Blaze Blues or Valkenheim in previous Blaze Blues, where they might not have like, well, okay, Valkenheim's an exception, right? But they might not have the greatest damage, but because of the fact that they might not have the greatest mix-ups, but because of the fact that their damage is so high, it changes how you fight against them. Because like Slayer can be losing the game for like 80% of the rounds, and then he gets 2 good hits and you die. Same thing with like Soul and Plus R. He loses the game 90% of the round. He hits you 2 times, you lose. Or like Chie, like Shadow Chie in Persona 4 Arena, her whole gimmick is to lose 95% of the round, hit you once, and proceed to TOD you. Like those characters, because of the way that they play, they force you to change how you approach everything because every hit is lethal.
Yeah, great. I mean, that again, great point there. I do want to, offer you an opportunity to summarize this in the context of our, grand thesis, so to speak. So, with all that being said, would you say there are situations with certain characters or certain players' playstyles where it would be better to have an optimal game plan and never deviate from it, or have a blend of exploitation and optimal game plan, or completely 100% exploitation is the way to go because exploitation is optimal? Uh, what's your verdict on that, 3K?
Obviously, I'm going to take the middle path. I think that there's warrants to playing that optimal game path because it inherently should have less risk. So you can actually see what the opponent's doing and make better decisions from it than go to exploitation, as I said previously. But I think it does depend on the character. Like, for example, like let's look at Pot. I don't care what you say about Pot. Pot cannot play optimally. He cannot play an optimized playstyle. He is just not meant for it. He does not have the tools to try to play, safe, clean, and reserve. He has to play exploitatively. He has to gamble to actually do anything. So it just depends on the character too. Like some characters, you are forced to gamble to do anything. Versus like other characters that have very safe game plans. Like if you look at let's say like I guess a very classic one people wouldn't mention is like Ram. Like Ram can just be very safe with her, and she can still win by doing the very like most safe options, just because her options covers so many stuff by doing the basic things. Meanwhile, you have other characters that are forced to take risks. So it is like a little bit player dependent. Where I do think you should ideally play a little bit safe reserve to get information, and then from there try to exploit your opponent. But some characters also just are forced to play it inherently one way or the other.
Okay, yeah, I don't, yeah, I
So
didn't,
I,
Norris, go ahead, go ahead.
oh yeah, that's partially why I think by design grapplers tend to have more health, since they do have to do it the exploited way. So they need more leeway to make mistakes or be wrong, essentially, uh, before they can get in and run their game plan. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 again, great point. I like that does kind of that's kind of an aside though. Like, we're focusing on game theory, not necessarily like
Mhm.
design of characters,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that is
yeah,
a
it's
bit of
it's
an
it's definitely
aside.
worth mentioning that because there are a lot of factors clearly in terms of like what goes into how a player chooses to play or what character they want to play. Of course, as 3K mentioned, based on what they value in a character. But again, since we're focusing on just game theory, so very abstract, general ideas for that are applicable to just fighting games in general as a competitive gaming genre. We're just trying to think about how these apply generally. So, really quickly, I do want to mention some comments that were provided earlier to us by Rig Jace. Um, he said, uh, um, so he said he was watching Stealthy's Axel guide, and he mentions that not ending your block strings and doing nothing helps to expose your opponent's habits that you can exploit later. And then I think a little earlier, he mentioned playing exploitatively is just better than because every human has weaknesses. So again, I think we've reached here an important paradox that is necessary to probably expand upon a little more while we still have time here. Um, like just you guys just give me a very terse yes or no, or feel free to expand on it if you'd like. I don't mind. But is playing exploitatively better because humans have weaknesses? Do you agree or disagree with
No,
that? Okay,
Not
so
necessarily.
not necessarily
I
no.
don't think it's so cut and dry.
Okay, it's not cut and dry. Norse, how about you?
There's something to be said about like I really like clean play. People who do play optimally and make it work. Uh,
Hey, Big
and
Monkey. Okay, Big Monkey, we're gonna have to deafen you. Okay.
I was about to say something, but like,
Oh, okay, okay.
all it
It
did.
happened. It
Okay,
happened.
fine. I'm just gonna deafen you right now, and then ping me when you uh uh ping me afterwards. Okay, I'll ping you afterwards or something like that. All right.
it depends. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think at least for games that are slower, in which playing optimally is essentially easier to do, and the options to RPS are easier to access, then exploitation becomes what you have to do to win.
Mm-mm.
If the game is very difficult, high execution vary, then playing optimally actually probably will let you just run over people because it's difficult to even get there. And I'm thinking of like Actress again in current code, where versus Under Night. So exploitation is strong in a game like Under Night, in my opinion, whereas optimal play is strong in a game like Actress again,
Mm-mm.
because executionally, the Actress again current code has a much higher barrier, and a lot of what you can do there, basically, if you're very clean, you can essentially run over someone in that game. Whereas I think executionally in Under Night, the barrier is much lower, and you end up hitting a wall and being unable to open someone up until you figure out how to exploit that quote unquote optimal play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the verdict I'm gathering here is that it's a decisive no, but there's also an it depends factor. So yes,
I
I
mean,
want to see
the
from
moral of
you.
the story is that there's always an it depends factor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I actually mentioned this earlier in the chat, but working with absolutes, especially in, the world of game theory, very dangerous, very dangerous. Now, it is an interesting thing, right? Because is that an absolute itself, right? Like, are we to never work in absolutes as an absolute itself? but I don't want to go there. That's a little too philosophical, right? Point being, um, it's clear that you can't get too comfortable in one mindset of playing. And this is again going to be a segue for what we'll talk about here next. But the idea here is that yes, while playing exploitatively has its necessary benefits, and it's probably best to leverage it to some degree in order to, you know, build upon your optimal play. It's clear that there are some games where just playing optimally, playing clinically, is just, better favors you in the end if you're able to do it. So yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and transition over to our next subtopic. What's up, Zenryoku? This is going to be, sorry, just getting my notes. So yeah, okay. So we talked a bit about, just exploiting the very opponents you're facing, right? And how that can look different and how you can manipulate that, right? Just in general, all of the things you seek to do um, can be can be made deceiving, like in a way of your choosing. So I want to touch on this a little more specifically now, uh, in the context of player matchups. Now, obviously, player matchups are probably something everyone talks about or feels the need to use as an asterisk anytime a new player wants to learn from a top player. I've noticed this, and this was something Armando mentioned in our Discord server. He said uh, it was recommended by a top melee player that you don't just try to learn melee from watching top eights because there are so many things that are happening under the cover based on the player matchup. So, in you guys' opinion, and please, please, please give me the most detailed opinion on this as you can, because again, this is probably one of the most important aspects of game theory itself. Otherwise, we are literally just playing against a dummy in training mode, right? I mean, player matchups have to play a role to some degree in competition context. Um, what are you guys' thoughts on the player matchups and whether those are necessary? Because I will say myself, for a while, I tried to learn fighting games without thinking at all what my opponent would do. Basically, for example, in Kokono and BBCF, there's so many like pre-rehearsed sets you can just run and never have to think about how your opponent responds to them because they're just so inherently hard to deal with, right? And perhaps that can be a crutch that's a luxury for her, but it still can be said that the player matchup paying some form of attention to it has its benefits. And maybe this is just a rehash of what we've already talked about, right? But if you want to mention that and as part of your comments, then please do so. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I actually want to hear what people think about that advice to not watch top eights because you're what you're watching is basically
I mean,
people who know each
I don't
other's game.
I don't think they said don't watch top eights. It's just like don't
Yeah, it's
learn
not like
solely
that's not the
by.
only thing.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
let's hear it.
Yeah,
Let's go for
you
a
go
gamer.
first.
Okay. I was gonna say I agree because the reason why is that like at a high level, like you said, there's a lot of things that they're considering that the average player is not going to be able to understand at the moment because they lack understanding of core concepts of the game. But also like a big thing is like you'll watch a top player and there's so many times we'll be like, oh, they're doing this and this thing is working, so it must be good. So I'm gonna use it. But you're using it without understanding why it's good. So then when you use it, you hear the classic like, hey, how come when X player does, close slash into blah blah blah, it always works. But when I do it, I just get matched on. Like this sucks. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like fighting games are bullshit. But it's because there's a lot of other stuff that's been happening to lead up to that point to do so. So I think actually watching footage around your level, or definitely like obviously the whole playing with people your level thing also helps a lot because you'll get to build your way up there. Now there is like merit, I still think, to watching top eights because you get to see options you wouldn't have previously considered before. And the same thing of like I'm using this option, I don't know why it works. You can keep using that option, and eventually you can understand where it's good and why they're using it ideally. So I think it's the whole like cop out answer of it depends. But I do think if you're starting out in the game, outside of watching some top eights just to like see how cool the game is at a high level, you should be focusing more on your level of play because there's going to be a lot of knowledge checks and stuff people do at your level that you aren't going to see at high level because those people don't use it because they understand that they are inherently risky and you only use it like one out of like 100 or one out of like 1,000 games. While at your level, you'll see it maybe like every 8 out of 10 games.
So 3K, is the metagame of playing against a very, elite group of players separate from the metagame of the mid level or the metagame of the low level? And
Oh,
is
definitely.
so there's a follow-up point to
Yeah.
this. Is the metagame of all of these tiers of competitive play in which we are taking into account the player matchup separate from the tier of play where we don't think about the player matchup at all and just play the characters?
Yeah, so as you could guess, if it's like low level, I'm not gonna try to interact with them. I'm just gonna play the character and be like, all right, I'm just gonna be as risk aversion as possible that I can for the most part, outside of like some reads here and there. But basically, versus certain players, I will not overextend at all. Versus mid level is kind of the same thing. It's like mainly play the character and then do a few player specific things that I notice versus them. But I'm not actively trying to only play the player. Then at a high level, where both of you know your character so well, you kind of know what options both of you can represent. So that's where it becomes less so of like, oh, I'm playing my character in terms of like getting their game plan going, but the options you pick are in response to the player, not more so the character. Like if you're in a range where it's like, let's say, I press some, like 5C or something with some character in a various game, and that always beats X character's 5A, then I'll always do that. But then X character has like the counterplay option, but it's slower, and it beats this other button. Versus like low level to mid level, you don't really have to worry about as much. But at like high level, or like let's say I'm constantly pressing 5C or something because that button's good, people are going to be more willing to, pick the riskier option because they understand it's a player matchup and not just I do the thing that my character's good at.
You're essentially exploiting knowledge about that player.
Oh,
Yes.
Norse, there you go. Ding, ding, ding. I sneakily just rehashed a topic we've already talked about. I just wanted to see
Uh-huh.
what you guys would say. But yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's so honestly speaking, like the player match is probably like, my favorite aspect of fighting games. Although it doesn't always come into play, as you've mentioned, certain characters are very good at essentially running like knowledge checks on the opponent, and like the player match never comes into play. It does depend on the game. So like it happens a lot in like Blaze Blue, for example, where a lot of the characters have really like nasty uh, setups and stuff that are difficult to deal with. And if you don't know, then you will probably die before you even do anything. Uh, Whereas if you play like a strike throw sort of game plan, or you play a grappler, then that doesn't happen as often. So so it depends on the character you're presented with on whether player matchup really even happens. Like even at high level, I think for certain characters, the player matchup doesn't occur as often for set play type
Yeah.
characters because they do have to deal with the set play after that first hit for a period of time. So if you want to avoid the player matchup, like if you don't like that, like the set play type of character actually is a better way to just not have to deal with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm,
Whereas
mm-hmm.
if you do like it, then you can go for a character that's stronger in like the strike throw game plan where you definitely have to understand them. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I suppose while we're here, can it be said that for a certain player, okay, no, maybe I should save this for the next subtopic, which will be the final one. So I'll keep my mouth shut for now. Jub, any thoughts?
Oh, I'm so busy thinking about playing it some.
Yeah, I saw you guys were super in the zone based on how you were playing. And you want to know how I knew that? Nah, it's fine. Anyway, go ahead.
Because he wasn't talking.
Anyway, go for it. Go for it.
What's that topic were we on again?
Okay.
So we're
It
on.
was
So we're on the player matchup. So the idea of the player matchup, right? It pertains to how you want to interact with your opponent. 3K mentioned earlier there are some people who just don't want to interact, so they'll play a character like maybe Valkenhayn. I personally said Kokonoe. Like I personally, come from a background of being a super lab heavy guy, so I did
oh
not
yeah.
play against very real people that often. So most of my style of play was just running the mix. And maybe I wasn't playing with regard to the player matchup, which could be said as a weakness or as a strength depending on what character you're playing or what mindset you have, or basically how you approach the game theory, just generally speaking. So my question to you, is the player matchup something that's important with regard to how we think of playing competitively? And is it something that's widely applicable? Because we've already established so far that, hey, the player matchup might not be necessary depending on the level of play you're at, or even the character you're playing, even if you're playing at a high level. So what are your thoughts?
Oh yeah. I think I don't know. It depends on like the way the character is designed, as everyone has already said. Like I think so. My philosophy for learning plus R is like you learn how to play your like one player game first, and then you like figure out how to play against the other guy, right? But
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, you'll run into a point where like part of your one player game is playing against the other guy. So like with Soul, it would be like doing a basic like strike throw mix up with Wild Throw because that's like one of the crucial aspects of the character. You have to be able to like condition your opponent to like either get hit by Wild Throw or because they're so scared, or like get hit by your frame traps because they're too antsy because of Wild Throw. So I think to an extent, player matchup is like always like a factor. It's just less. It becomes more apparent to better. And I think other people have already come to this same conclusion. So
Yeah,
we're not really treading on new ground here.
for sure. Yeah, I was a little deceptive in how I framed this subtopic, right? As you guys have identified now. I am no magician here. But going back to the Reddit thread, and 3K, if you want to add anything real quick after I mention these two things, then please do so before
Yeah,
we
yeah.
move on. But
Also,
oh, okay.
after you guys finish, I'd like to touch on one more thing.
Sorry?
After you guys finish, I'd like to touch on one more thing.
Oh, sure, yes, sure. So the Reddit thread, okay. There's this idea, and I probably should have mentioned this while we were talking about while we were earlier into this conversation on game theory. But the part of the reason why playing optimally is a little like repulsive, the thought of it at least, is that it's the point of it is that it's like playing optimally in its pure form is impossible for a human. We're just inherently flawed. We have weaknesses that can be exploited if they're found, right? So the whole idea was that, all right, we'll play as close to optimally as possible. That's what the Reddit thread was trying to say. But if you try to play as close to optimally as possible, you'll still have weaknesses in your game plan. So instead of trying to play as close to optimally as possible, why not try to why not try to extenuate the weaknesses of your opponent and you know go from there, right? So in that regard, it's very possible that the player matchup is just unavoidable, just generally speaking. If you play in a competitive setting against a human, which is what we do in fighting games, um, it it's always the player matchup's always going to come up. I suppose you could. Sarah saying Tekken players in shambles. That's funny. Um, and actually, thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that because Zenryoku had a comment earlier I found very interesting, and I hope you're still here because I think what you said is profound. Um, the player matchup or the Yomi is the most fun to me. Just throwing knowledge checks at each other is kind of boring.
Yeah,
That'll lead
I thought
into
this
our
was
next
true.
subtopic. So please, Jub, feel free to comment.
Okay, so I think this is just I'm not really sure how related. It might only be tangentially related, or it might be like related at the core. But normally, when you think of like playing exploitatively with regards to other players, you think about like I guess like exploiting their like their habits or their like decision making. Um, and like usually you think of that in terms of like I don't know, like discrete things that you can like describe, I guess. Like for example, I don't know. Back in the days, I would like throw Monkey's Burst all the time because he just like burst on like the first 2-8 in the combo. Uh, Stuff like that. But one thing I've been considering more and more recently about exploiting other people is that you can also like instead of just considering like the discrete like decision making like philosophy, another important factor to consider is also like the speed of their decision making. And I really only thought of this because like Plethora is like in theory a pretty like fast paced game, right?
Hmm.
Like you've got all these anime characters doing their anime movement, and you have to like respond. This is like I think a bigger thing in Melty Blood because like the way the reverse beat mechanic and like especially in MBAC like with 5A and you whiff cancel it into something else like feint your opponent to make it look like you're resetting pressure, but actually you're just frame trapping them again. But I was thinking like I wanted to like practice thinking faster because if you consider that like your opponent is limited by the speed at which they think, then you can force all sorts of decisions on them, and they won't be able to respond. Not because necessarily their decision-making policies are bad, but simply like raw horsepower. Their decision-making speed can't keep up with what you're doing, and it also like I think works in reverse, right? If you like slow the pace of the game down to a crawl, a lot of people also can't handle that. They'll make like a lot of impulsive decisions to try to like bring the pace of the game like back to their speed. So if you can like drag your opponent into that kind of like I guess psychological warfare of like controlling the speed of the game, that's also like a interesting way to exploit them other than outside of like exploiting their like I said, their discrete like decision making tendencies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
adding on to
go for
that
it.
real quick,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I like the whole tempo thing because Justin Wong always says that he's made a career in fighting games just by making people impatient. Like he just says, he'll just block the mix, take the throw for a lot of games, and he said because of that, people will get angry, and then they'll start making bad decision making, which allows him to get really easy punishes on stuff that they normally wouldn't do.
A B and tactics. It works.
Yeah, you guys again, fantastic points. I love every thought that's, been offered here. I think we have some good things to consider for ourselves if we seek to become the best competitive players that we wish to. And as I've just said that we wish to, that's going to be an important segue into the next topic, which is mindset. And before you guys raise your pitchforks and say, what does mindset have to do with game theory? All right, all right. I've been exposed. Mindset doesn't have too much to do with game theory. But in fighting games, a lot of people have different approaches to how they play competitively. And I feel like that to some degree leads to different metagames just based on the fact that people have different like goals that are that get expressed in how they play. Zenryok over here mentioned earlier that it's boring to just throw out knowledge checks. And because it's boring, he's averse to the thought, right? A lot of people, I'm sure, share in that sentiment. It's boring to just throw out knowledge checks online against these same people.
I actually wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, please, please, please.
Yeah, so yeah, I find a lot of people dislike characters. I'm going to use BlazBlue as an example again. uh, they dislike fighting characters like Arakune, Carl,
I was about
Rachel,
to say, yeah,
Izanami.
do not
So
speak
those
to
are
Harakune players.
yeah. Arakune is like the big one that everyone talks about. Like when he curses you, then you're just like it's a one player game. Ha ha ha. Uh, I actually so personally, I actually really like Arakune, and my favorite part is when he does the curse mix up. And the reason for this, let me tell you what. Same with Seth and his and the weird shit he does. Uh, so that moment when Arakune gets his curse, he basically like the player is feeling really nice at that point, right? And that's when that's when they will take their chance to style on you. And you get to see what they think will open you up. And I really like to see what kinds of things people do in that sort of when they're free to do whatever they want sort of thing. And it feels really nice when you block it correctly too. So
I heard like a similar it was on the like the other side, right? But I heard like a similar philosophy where the reason like or I should preface this properly. There was like a Marvel 2 player who was like asked like why do you like exclusively play Marvel? Specifically Marvel 2, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it's because it's like the only game where I can just like feel where I feel like I can just do literally anything I want on it."
yeah.
Yeah,
There's a
I
lot of
wanted to.
appeal in that sort of thing.
Yeah,
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 I
sorry,
want to.
3K.
I've like encouraged people not to make Arakune players feel bad.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah,
Before further thoughts are added, I don't feel like I fully like established the context. I know you guys like probably have a lot of things to say and probably have an idea of where I'm
Yeah,
going with this, but
yeah, go.
um,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no worries. So basically, the reason I bring up mindsets, there are different approaches to playing fighting games, and even just in game theory, generally speaking, there are different approaches one can take. You can have the I'm playing for fun approach. I mean, this is still applicable. Game theory isn't all about just playing optimally against a human opponent. There's more to it because a game is a game. It's how it's played is all the theory concepts involved. So the idea of playing for fun, you might have a different way of playing for fun than someone else might have who's also playing for that same fun. Some people just have different ways of having fun. Zenryok over here says, I have fun playing this nonsense of a character in Arakune, even though he said it's boring to knowledge check people. And then you have other people who say it's fun for me to have this very scientific gigabrain character who requires hundreds of hours of lab time to land these unfair mix-ups, right? And then you have some people who prefer playing their hero protagonist because that's also fun for them. And then
Mhm.
outside of the I play for fun spectrum, there's the I play to win spectrum. And
Yeah, but
yes,
winning is fun.
yeah, there you go. There you go. I'm yes, you know exactly where I'm going. I'm glad. Um,
Hey.
yeah, so Serlin wrote this book, Playing to Win. And in a not so subtle way, he was quoting that person, I forget their name, but you guys probably know who I'm talking about. Oh, yes, Big Monkey. I'm sorry. I had you muted this whole time. I'm not sure if you added a comment earlier, but let me know. I know you hear me. Anyway, yeah, playing to win, right? Playing to win can look again differently depending on the person. They might see a certain style of playing be the exact way to win, and as we've quite exhausted so far already, exploitatively versus optimally might be the ways to win depending on the person you're talking to. And I think we can establish right now that even if there were an exact optimal way a human can play, it's not only not attainable, but it's also just not absolute. It doesn't seem like absolute enough, or that it should be absolute enough because again, you don't want to you don't want to make yourself predictable by having an absolute optimal strategy. And then furthermore, besides the playing to win and the playing for fun, there's the side of I'm playing for clout or I'm playing to be popular. So I'm using this character I know will win me some fans so that I can promote my YouTube channel later on if I make it to top 8. Such a thing does exist, by the way. That is not uh, that is not a far-fetched goal to have for playing any sort of competitive game. And I want to remind you guys, as Norse identified, there is overlap. There is no mutual exclusivity in any of these mindsets of playing a competitive video game. So, with that all being said, what are you guys' thoughts? This is again very general. Don't give
Yeah.
me a I play for fun and then leave it at that. Please give
Yeah.
me your most detailed response. Go for it. Okay.
Before going to the mindset thing, I just want to just briefly mention about Zen's point about not a fan about knowledge checks. I want to play the player matchup. I understand that, but the thing though is that you can't even get to the player matchup unless you know the knowledge checks. So like at some point, if everyone had the same opinion, like, oh, I don't want to knowledge check my opponent because I want to play the player matchup. Well, it's not going to work when they finally fight someone that does do the knowledge checks, and all of a sudden they're getting torqued on because they don't know how to deal with a certain move. So you need to understand, or you already need to have the knowledge to be able to play the player matchup, which is why I think knowledge checks and learning are valuable, that you should do them to people just so that they can learn from it. Like if you want people to be able to play the player matchup, you need to knowledge check them so you can tell them after the matches or mid match what to do versus the said knowledge checks. Like today I was playing Rev 2 and someone didn't know how Raven worked, so I explained completely how Raven's game plan worked and what they could do on defense versus him. And so hopefully next time we play, I'll be forced to go on to the player matchup and the next layer because my stuff won't work as easily. So that's just what I wanted to say for that. But in terms of playing, I'd say I play to learn. I don't really care about winning this game, and I don't compete in any fighting games on like a tournament level. There are like games that I think I could compete in tournaments, but that's not really what I'm interested in. I just like using fighting games for self improvement. So like when I play, I like helping others learn, and I like helping myself learn. So I'll do stuff on purpose to other people to explain how to beat it, so that way I can develop the next layer to go to. And also the same thing when I'm playing for someone, I'm not going to be like, oh, let me do my 87 overhead, triple fuzzy bajillion combo on them, unless it's like exclusively what the character does, because I want to be able to identify how to deal with certain things. It's the same thing also like in certain games, or like when I don't know how to play defense versus a certain character, I will just sit there and I will block longer than I need to. Like I'd be like, okay, I know he's gonna reset here. I know he can challenge. I know that I can probably do something here because I know he's gonna throw here. But if I know he's gonna throw, that doesn't help me. I need to understand how the rest of the character works. So like when I was playing against Pergrade on Friday, I did not understand how Chip worked. Like I was getting games, but I was like, I don't understand how Chip's offense works at all. So I just sat in the corner on purpose to try to get a better idea of how I could actually challenge Chip's offense. So I think it depends too, because a lot of people use the scoreboard as a way of being like, oh, I lost to this person 20-0, but now the score is 20-10. I got so much better. I think the scoreboard is helpful for learning, but people only use the scoreboard as a way to see if they're getting better or not. And I think that's a trap a lot of good players fall into. Even top players in uni would fall into. I'm not gonna name any names, but there's people out there who would do such a thing. And like it's true in every single game. Top players too often use the scoreboard to indicate if they're improving or not, when you should be looking at the content of the matches. In tourney play, where the score and who you beat matters, go off. Be like, I 2-0'd your ass. Take that shit. Hold that. But like in like casuals, if you're like, damn, I 10'd you in casuals, like it still means that obviously you were doing something correct, right? But that doesn't mean that the other person was trying to play to win. They're probably also trying to play to learn or play to have fun. And it's not 100% accurate of your skill levels. There is a rough extrapolation you can take of it, but there's too many times where people only see casual games as like, I need to constantly try hard, I need to win games and all that, when you don't need to. Like, if I'm playing in casual, it should be to learn, so that when I actually play them in a serious environment, I can try to use everything I learned to do so.
Very profound. Playing to learn, I would not probably have expected that to be an available mindset. But hey, I mean, the permutations of mindsets to use in competitive gaming, they're innumerable. And certainly I've learned a thing or two from hearing you're having discussed your mindset yourself, so I appreciate that. Anything else, you guys?
Me, I play because I believe in this genre wholeheartedly. Those are my true and profound feelings.
The real Oki was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, dude. When 3K was talking, I like wanted to scream because I had like a friend who was like that.
Yes,
Or
yes.
he used to be like that. He wasn't even like really serious about fighting games, but like whenever he would play and like do like marginally better, he'd be like, "Oh my god, guys, am I improving?" Dude, once he asked, like, okay, this sounds like fucking stupid, and I'm sorry that I have to bring up Smash in a
How dare you?
pure, honest fighting game podcast, but he was like once he lost to my friend's like pocket Ganondorf because he SD'd and he was like, "Oh, guy," or sorry, no, he beat my friend's pocket Ganondorf because he SD'd, and he was like, "Yo, am I getting better?" And it was like, where's like the actual like part where you improve?
Yeah, it's like because like if they mention like, oh, I did this thing better, then they're actually like quoting reasons of their improvement. But yeah, people are
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
damn, I got a game, or like I got a stock off MK Leo. I'm so good. It's like I mean like there's still like some stuff to be said if you got a stock off MK Leo, good for you, right? Or like whatever top player you got a round off of. But you need to be like not just being like, oh, I got a round, I improved. You have to be analyzing why you got that round to see your improvement. Because if you just did everything you've been doing for the past 6 months and you haven't, evolved your gameplay at all, and you got that round, okay, great, you got a round. But that doesn't matter if you haven't actually done anything new or noticed your own improvement. Which is why I think that a lot of people should try to record some of their old games and watch them back compared to nowadays, because you'll see a lot of stuff that you did that you previously wouldn't do nowadays to be able to see your improvement. Because that's another topic for another time. But sometimes people don't actually see their improvement because they get used to their current skill level. Where if you looked like 6 months ago, you'll see how much you actually did improve.
Yeah, 3K. I followed everything you said there, but I couldn't help but realize that I found a shift in your perspective. You described a playing to learn mindset, and then started to kind of think through it and notice a lot of similarities between that and playing to win. I'm not saying you contradicted yourself, but what I will say is that there are plenty of people who might not necessarily have that same approach, and maybe they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting better," like the Jub's friend would say, but maybe they're not really trying to like necessarily get better, but more so get better like as a means to having more fun. Maybe that's just what they value out of getting better. And Zenryuk in the chat over here saying, if we're both having fun, that's optimal to me. I feel like that's just another one, like that's just another form of those mindsets that are available to a fighting game player and, just competitive gamers as a whole. But let's now kind of like, okay, I'll let Norse have her comments
Oh
if you
yeah.
like. Go for it. Go for
Could
it.
I could I just say one more thing real quick?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to say that I think playing to learn and playing to win have very similar things, but there is a distinction. I think the thing though that's different for me is that even though I don't compete in tournaments because of financial reasons and all that, um, I play to learn so I can win. That's why I play the way I do in casuals. I play to learn because I want to be able to win, which is why I do so. So that's like the distinction where like I guess it's like a pseudo mindset of that where I'm playing in a certain way so that I can have a higher chance of winning in bracket. And I'll let you go for it now, Norris, what you want to see on the topic.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about the whole playing optimally thing that was brought up earlier because it made me think of something. Okay, so I really think that the best way to play for a player depends on the player. And
Mm-hmm.
it's good to look at other like top players for ideas of how to play. And it is even good to try copying them and seeing what works for you. But playing exactly like another top player isn't always going to work for yourself, since you may have different strengths as a player. But it's worth trying it. And it's worth trying a lot of different styles until you kind of develop what works for you. So yeah, what's optimal is basically as diverse as how many people there are, in my opinion. As for mindset, uh, it's really hard to say. So I think I can answer this based on what makes me the most sad about a set if it happens. And I think like if I don't get to show someone anything, or like I don't feel like they got anything from our match, then I feel legitimately like depressed about a match. So maybe I am playing so that I guess like so that I can show them stuff. Like I want to learn stuff so that I can show people stuff that's cool that they
No, I
can
feel like you
use.
sound actually a lot like a creative right now. You want to bring something into the world by playing the game. That's really
Right,
cool.
right. Yeah.
Playing to
Yeah,
recruit.
like
Okay, whoa. You go
yeah,
for it. Oh,
because
sorry. Yeah.
if yeah. Like if I don't feel like I gave them anything out of that match, then it's like I feel like they like I wasted their time. It's sad. Playing to recruit. Yeah. That kind of is. I want them to see the beauty in this genre. So I play to show them things that I think are cool, or things that I think they might find interesting, things they might want to use or want to try to do. Uh, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's sick. That's sick. Big Monkey, please.
Yeah, I wanted to speak about this on like both sides, both from like trying to get people into playing games that I like, and also like going 0 and 70. But
Oh,
I
going
definitely
zero
think
70.
it takes a certain mindset to, you know, get yourself into learning what other people do, but also like starting from learning your own character, right? Like, I don't think it's great to be like a great feeling to be on the side of like losing to a character and then you still don't know how to run your own shit, but it's like, oh, you can do this against my stuff, and it's like, but I'm not at that level yet. So it's like, I think playing to win is what a lot of people who aren't like super familiar with the genre really think about, because it's like coming from like FPSs or something, right? You don't play a match to improve, right? You're not reading the other team mid match past the point of, oh, they're going A again, right? Or like something like that. Most of your stuff comes out of like aim training, or like, I guess, watching pro videos, which is like counterintuitive to getting better at fighting games. And I think that sitting down and losing is a good way of actually learning about how you yourself play. And well, I'm currently doing that, so it's fresh in my mind. And also,
Honestly, I felt like I was being subtweeted the whole time there. It's a little terrifying.
Yeah, take that, Jub.
Oh my god!
He's metagaming you.
I'm
He's talking to you while you're playing so that you can play worse.
I'm shrilling into a corn cob this instant.
Okay, sorry, Big Monkey, please.
um,
Fuck.
I also wanted to talk about like the Jub's little anecdote about his friend in Smash, and it's like recently I felt kind of the same way, and I didn't want to say it to anybody because it sounds like I'm snubbing new players, right? But at the end, it's like measuring wins. Where at like, sure, you might be improving as like a correlation, but your win might definitely not have been caused by like, oh, the other person is getting downloaded or something. Maybe they're trying new shit. I don't know, but
Sometimes they
I
just
don't like
like
that mindset. And Chub knows. I think Plus R is the, besides Tekken, it's the first game I've ever like made an effort to put a lot of learning time into, and as a result, playing against like Daydream, Jub Jub, EGP, I have unsightly win-loss records.
To give you some credit, I feel like you have improved since last time we played.
I'm trying to anti-O more, but that's
I think you're
has the
doing a
point.
really good job of it. I feel like I can get away with a lot less random jump JHs.
The recovery is still fucking with me, but
Yeah,
that's
it's a
just
stupid move.
so.
Like
All right,
sometimes
I
you
gotta
just
keep you
lose.
guys on track. I gotta keep you guys on track.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry. Was there any other part of the question that I didn't touch on? I feel like
Well,
sometimes I ramble a little.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, well, maybe this perhaps will help, get your wheels of thoughts going again.
The wheels
Um,
of fate are turning. Oh.
Thank you. Yes, yes, they
Yeah.
are. I hope they are, because we're about to, finish this off here, with this last comment I'll kind of make to drive the rest of the conversation. So,
Oh,
with all of this, the reason I asked you guys what kind of playing mindset exists, we're kind of circling back into the game theory portion of this, because again, I kind of established here that uh, this might have sneakily not been a real game theory topic, but this will, don't worry, this relates to it somehow. Okay. Um, so with all this being said, there are plenty of mindsets as we've like basically concluded here, right? And all of these might be better for some people and worse for others. And there are certain mindsets that people just kind of um, favor towards just based on maybe their background or their personality, all of that, right? But now I want to ask you guys, what what would you say is the necessary mindset for a competitive player to have if they want to leverage any of the theory that we've discussed in terms of playing exploitatively versus a player who seeks to just, run their optimals? What is the mindset that's needed? And don't give me this, oh, it's just the best one, like just the best one for them. No, I want
That's too
to.
shallow, anyways.
Well, that's just not good enough for me right now. Okay, I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
hear I want to hear your hottest takes on what the best mindset is to have, because we need to have some kind of closure on the idea of game theory for fighting games, right? We need to come away from this having learned, all right, what if we were to become future competitive players? Or I'm not saying that we aren't already, but I'm saying what if we were to like, make this some heightened profession for ourselves? What would be the necessary components or required traits to have? And, part of that being the playing mindset. So what are your guys' thoughts on this?
I guess I'll start with what I would say. I kind of already talked about it, but I think you have to have a trait of not care if you lose in casuals. Like people are always like, "Oh my gosh, you got a game off of Umi show. You're so cracked." And I think that as a top player, if you're trying to become a top player in a game and you start getting good, you should not care if people like say comments like that, because you should be trying to play to learn and improve in your casuals. So you don't care if you lose as long as you're getting better in your eyes and you can see the improvement, whether by analyzing past footage to yourself or having serious sets with people and using the scoreboard and decision making on that to come up with other stuff. So you got to kind of have like I think a thick skin, and you need to play a way where you don't really care if you lose in casuals, because at the end of the day, who cares if you go 20 over to somebody in casuals, but you 3-0 them in bracket, you know.
I hear you. I hear you. Anything else, guys?
um,
I
I
think you
want to
need
say.
to, or you go first.
Oh, okay. um, I was just gonna say, like, if you watch like Korean Tekken streams, people like JDCR talk about how they think. I think that's like close to the optimal mindset, because in Tekken, like, you don't, when you're playing neutral, you don't think about the optimal way to go about these things. You think about every single option and like how. I mean, I guess that's the optimal way, right? Like covering the most options you can with single decision. But being able to say like, I guess I just kind of derailed myself, but um, you want to give your opponent space to create your whiffs, and through that you're not going to be doing, oh, this is gapless, so you do this, right? You're leaving holes for your opponent to react to, and you can react to them accordingly or deal with them.
All right, so what does that look like in terms of a mindset, like a psychological state where you are hyper focused in looking to play competitively, leveraging all of the things we talked about game theory? Because, what you said is very sound, but I want to hear like a more direct and pertinent
Oh my
point
god, you
if
hit
you'd
the
like.
UC. Let's go, monkey.
I think Jub mentioned this like a little while ago. It's like the actually providing different stimuli for people to react to, just like giving them X and then seeing if they do respond with Y, Z, or A, whatever, right? And taking note of that. And I think that's the optimal way to play. Not just giving them
Oh
X,
no,
Y,
but
Z.
we're talking about like the mindset you need to have as a competitor.
Ah,
Yeah, so we discussed
like,
like playing to win, playing for fun. We said, oh yeah, it
oh, okay,
differs
you're
per
tying it. Okay,
person,
okay,
right?
sorry.
But I don't
Oops.
want to hear, oh, the best one is just the one that the person decides. I don't want to hear that.
Right,
Right,
right.
we've already talked about that. I want to hear if you, Mr. Monkey, were to become a competitive fighting game player and as like a heightened profession. I'm not going to say like esports pro, right? Because that looks different for different people. Let's just say you were willing to attend every tournament that you could, right? And you're trying to win. You're trying to win the big bucks.
Mhm, mhm.
What necessary mindset would you need in order to leverage everything that we discussed, playing optimally versus exploitatively? Thinking of the conditioning aspects, psychology, which we probably didn't expand too much on conditioning. We can the next time we talk about this, but feel free to give your thoughts on this. I just want to hear something concrete.
So I think I picked two. One, optimally, and two, playing exploitatively.
Oh no
I
no
don't
no,
think playing
sorry.
for fun. But
Sorry. The
oh,
the mindset. The mindset. So we've already established like yes, there are these
yeah,
ways to
like
play
playing
optimally or
for
exploitatively.
fun and optimally, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sure.
Okay. Um, I'm just saying those two, differentiating those two as like it depends on what character you play, but I don't think I have to go into that. I think playing optimally in a competitive setting is best, and discussing for fun is best. Like playing for fun casually, and then like thinking about things that are like fun to think about. Like if I did TK Air Super on Soul's DP wake up, then he takes 70% damage, be instantly stunned. But like when you're in this top 8 and you're in it for the bucks, I think you definitely need to play to win and like hone in on that. But I'm not a competitor, so
Sure. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, that's fine. Thanks for sharing that. Anything else, guys?
I think. Oh no.
No. Okay.
No. I just need a minute to collect my thoughts.
Oh,
Give
okay.
me a
Sure.
second.
Sure. No
If
worries.
you want, okay, you wanted like hot takes, right?
Yeah, I want the hot takes. I want to hear what it takes to be a competitor.
Yeah, if
What
you
kind of
want,
mental do you need?
okay, all right. So let me tell you what I think. If you seriously want to win, and you are like you at the top number one, you need to have the will to kill.
Ooh.
You have to like it beyond like you still be a good person. Like don't be a jerk. But like you need to play as though your life is on the line. Like if you lose everything. That's not true afterwards, but in the moment, that's how you have to play. Absolutely.
Mm-mm.
And like you cannot compromise that. You need that kind of mindset, I guess, to focus on the victory. And yeah. So you don't hold back. It's the opponent is going to have to die from you from you. You have to like have that sort of resolve. And uh yeah, I think that's what you need. And you also as a person, you need the ability to kind of pull yourself away from that after the match. And I think that's what's so difficult and why so many top players have such difficulty. Like they feel so horrible when they lose. Like they like cry privately or whatever. They feel super depressed after losing. It's because they
They go to
have
Twitter and complain about
that
their opponent.
extreme, yeah, their extreme desire to win. And you need that. But at the same time, you need to outside of the game, just remember that yes, you don't always win. Sometimes when you don't win, you gain something else. So it's okay. But yeah. So that's what I think. You gotta be willing to kill him
You know
and
that
kill him dead.
Norse, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that was that very hot of a take. Like I think that was very cool. That was very sane, I would say. It sounded anime, yeah, but what's for certain is that it's sound. I really think there's a lot of truth in what you said.
All
And
right.
yeah, okay, 3K, what's up?
I guess like this is the whole like traditional save that shit for nationals. But if
Okay.
you really want to win and you don't care about like morals or anything, you should hide information.
Oh, okay. Okay, I
Mm,
hear you.
I
mm.
think that if you legitimately want to win and like people don't know how to deal with X in your character, you shouldn't tell
Yeah.
people how to beat your character. You should just let them do it. Now, obviously, I don't think that's fun. Like I want to beat somebody when they know how to deal with my options. But if you really like all you care about is winning, you don't care about what else. You should always pick the best character. You should always, be studious in your matchup knowledge. But whenever people ask about you character, you should either spread misinformation on purpose or just be like, oh, I haven't dealt with it because I haven't, blabbed it that much, and like just let people find out their own answer for themselves, not giving them anything for free. If you really
Yeah,
want to be like scummy to
misinformation's
win,
risky
Bomb has been
because
yeah.
people
dropped.
can find out that you lied, basically.
Or like
So,
you could always
although
just say like,
withholding is okay.
but like the thing is like if you do like misinformation, you could always just say like, "Oh, I messed up my training mode labbing because I wasn't pressing the button fast enough. My bad, guys." Like if you really want to
Yeah,
win, you could lie and get away with it because there's plenty of times where people like are like, "Guys, I figured out how to deal with X with this character," and then someone tests it, they're like, "Damn, I fucked up, guys. I didn't press 5K enough. Yeah, we can't do anything here." They're like, "No, right?" Like that happens. It just happens by
no,
mistake.
yeah.
Like, if you really want to be malicious to win, you could do that. You could do this
Hmm.
bullshit politics. Now, I hope no one ever does that, but there's definitely like the whole like, oh, save that shit for nationals. People definitely withhold information. Thank God
Yeah,
nobody spreads
I think
misinformation,
it.
but if they wanted to, they could.
I
3K, that's
honestly think.
chaotic evil.
Yeah. No, there are definitely like certain setups you want to keep in your pocket that probably no one's ever seen before.
Yeah, that's why I legit like the Karmon players are insane to me because their
Yeah.
character is heavily reliant on knowledge checks. Now, don't get me wrong, Fuzzy super fucked up. You can't do anything about it. Assault JA, 6C, those are all hard to block. But they literally have a document with all their setups that is public view for anyone to look at. So if they wanted to, they could get rid of that, and then no one knows how to fight the character now because they don't know how to deal with like the fake cross up, the fake overhead, all the fake throw stuff. Like if they wanted to, they
Yeah.
could, but they don't because they understand that it's more fun, at least for them, if both you and the opponent know how to deal with the character. Like if your character is only good at knowledge checks, your character probably isn't that good if people actually know how to deal with it. Now, obviously, knowledge checks, that's a whole different topic. Sometimes they're fine because they overload mental stack, and if you overload mental stack, then knowledge checks become real. But that's another topic for another day. But yeah, in terms of like if you want to win, you could do a lot of morally wrong or vile stuff to do so. Although I don't think
Ooh.
anyone would, or at least I hope no one would.
Ooh, 3K. You have hit the
The
nail on. Oh, sorry, sorry.
Oh yeah, I said that's my hot take.
No, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. And again, I actually don't think that was very hot of a take. Now, of course, that was that went above and beyond my expectations. But in terms of what I was actually looking for, like what I hoped for, I think you're spot on, okay? Now, let's kind of summarize what you just described here. Basically, what you said is that if someone just wants to win at all cost, they should be a very selfish person. They should be self-absorbed. Do whatever it takes to win. Okay, now we've established that this might be what separates the fighting game community from being just like a bloody old sport where people, compete at all costs. It's very clear to me that when people go to tournaments, they want to win, but they don't have this win at all costs mindset. So are we now to say that these people are neglecting the fundamentals of game theory and are just shooting themselves in the foot? Or are we to say that these people are living the best time of their lives playing fighting games and hanging out with their friends? And then winning a tournament is just another bonus on top of that because you don't make a lot of, cash in your pocket anyway.
Yeah.
That's a rhetorical question. So, we can talk about that another time because that's not really game theory related. But it's to say, I guess the friends we made along the way are the real victories, and all of this stuff about you gotta be out for blood, you gotta have your guns loaded, and all of that gets thrown away, right? Because everyone's just trying to have a good time, and these are games after all. They're supposed to be fun to some degree. Um,
Mhm.
all right, I think this is good enough, guys, for us to reach our conclusions and perhaps any auxiliary thoughts you want to get in there. What's up, EGP? Um,
Man, I didn't even get to say anything on the last topic.
you want to? Please, please. I'm sorry. If there's been a lot in my mind during this
Bro,
episode,
I was like,
so I'm sorry
I
about
want to
that.
collect the thoughts, and then like Doris talked, and then 3K talked, and then Chris talked, and like, damn,
Yeah,
I'm just getting
my
so
bad,
much.
Jub
Sorry,
Jub.
please, please, please.
No,
Jub, go
it's all
ahead.
good. Yeah. I mean, I guess I have to preface this with being like, this is like in the same vein as like what I said earlier about like just believing in the genre. It's like obviously kind of cheesy as shit, but I think to some extent, you have to believe that what you're doing is like one like worthwhile and like two like it has to have some meaning to you, right? I think I don't know. Okay, maybe this is BM to like just say like this, but I have to do it for the sake of the podcast and like clarify my point. But I think like I fell off Strive like what 4 or 5 months ago, and it's like I felt like if I really wanted to, I could like become good at the game. I mean, maybe that's just fucking wrong, right? Maybe I'm like total ass, but that's not really the point. No, I just fuck. I dropped loot. I got sidetracked. Uh, I know, like it got to the point where it like sort of felt like getting better was like work instead of like actually satisfying. Because like what I was doing to like I don't know like get the win in the first place wasn't like satisfying at all, right? Um. Okay, I really shouldn't actually say that. This game that would get too off topic, but I think the point still stands that hold on. Okay, I
Had to
dropped
finish this combo.
it. Yeah. So I think the point still stands that like ultimately there has to be some sense of inherent satisfaction, not just in like the process of learning, but like the actions that you're actually like manually performing, right? Because like if you just wanted to improve at something, like there are like a wide multitude of stuff that you could like just do for the sake of improving. But you have to be like actually invested in like the physical actions that you're taking in order to go on the learning process. And it's, especially because it's like fighting games, right? Like you could imagine a case in which like I don't know in some bigger genre like MOBAs or FPSs, like people are literally just doing it because they're good at it and they want like the external reward, right? But I don't know. I feel like I could never do such a thing. There are definitely people who can, but like especially for fighting games, like we're pretty much just in this because ultimately it's satisfying. It's like we don't really need that much of an external um like an external motivator outside of like the presence of our community, and maybe sometimes not even that. Some people just like are lab rats that just play the games like by themselves, just because it's so satisfying. So like what I said earlier, it's really just a case of you have to believe in what you're doing. Yeah, EGP sums it up pretty well, I think.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. As with all things, on this planet, there's some vanity and there's some element of reward and satisfaction. But we
Right.
can't
It's
just
never
be,
so cut and dry.
yeah, exactly. But we also can't just be satisfaction seekers. There has to be an inherent purpose to what we're doing. I mean, because there again, if you want satisfaction, there are plenty of R-rated things you can do for that. You don't have to play fighting games, unless you're a masochist and you think getting beaten hundreds of times in a row is satisfying. But again, perhaps a deviant point. I do want to close this off with saying I really appreciate you guys joining this podcast for a very difficult topic. I think this is probably the most challenging things to put into words, this kind of topic. Um, oh no, I'm not based. You didn't hear anything I said, Rick Jace. I definitely wasn't implying anything. So, so you guys, thank you so much for being a part of this uh, discussion experience. I want to call it as well because again, I feel like learned a lot today, not just from myself, not just from hearing you guys talk, but also watching you guys play. Because what I learned is that you guys are experts at playing while talking. I certainly cannot do that myself. And another thing I learned is that there's so much
Oh my god, I'm
similarity
godlike.
between fighting games and just competitive gaming in general. And I really don't know why we have to be looked at as outsiders within the esports world when we're really one and the same for many reasons. Of course, there's differences, but I think we can set those aside and realize that there's a lot of similarities in what we do. Regardless, though, again, I think to summarize what we've learned here, um, we've learned that there are different approaches to game theory in fighting games. There's the idea of exploiting your opponent's weaknesses or having a very clinical laid out game plan that you just stick to the T, and that can vary based on the game or the character you so choose. And then the fact that the psychological elements can be choose to be leveraged by particular players depending on how they want to get out of what they want to get out of in a fighting game, and perhaps that can make them more or less susceptible to certain things that an optimal player would not be susceptible to, or would be susceptible to. And then furthermore, we also learned that optimal itself as a concept is in many ways like infinity. It is probably not real for all intents and purposes. Humans probably can't attain it ever. And the fact that game theory focuses very much on optimal play is perhaps a sad thing, but it's something fun to talk about, which I think is what matters. It brings us closer together too. I mean, as we've done tonight, right?
I
And
mean,
then,
I think
okay,
just to interject on you, if it's all
okay,
right.
sure, yeah,
I think even without like infinity isn't attainable, but it's still like useful, I think. Like
okay, yeah, useful, sure.
converging on infinity, like I think the I was like really enamored with this idea at some point, but I think the idea of like converging in on infinity is just as useful as like the idea of infinity itself. Like there's always something to be done.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, yeah, again, we can expand upon that perhaps in part two. And you guys, I do want to make it very clear that this is by no means the conclusion of our discussion in game theory and fighting games or game theory in general. This is a very big topic. Uh, Literally, there are college classes, and you can perhaps even specialize this at universities. This kind of thing doesn't get fully covered in a 2 hour session among fighting game players. Okay. That being said, thank you, Jub Jub, for bringing that up because it is probably worth mention. It is probably still worth talking about and thinking about optimal play because that alone is going to force you to have to refine your strategies if you seek to be a good player, competitively speaking, right? So just saying, oh yeah, it's not attainable optimal play, therefore I am not gonna try to get better. That's no good, of course. It's good to have these kinds of things thought about so that you can figure out ways to improve yourself and also not beat yourself up when things don't go the way you planned. All right, and then finally we talked about mindsets necessary to have in order to become a competitive player. Not just the mindsets for such a player, but also the mindsets that we personally have and how that affects our approach to fighting games in general. And of course, we talked about player match. We talked about high damage things. I think those got to be touched on a little more next time. But um, I think that just about covers everything we talked about. I'm just trying to see if we missed anything in the chat or voice text. Doesn't look like it so far. Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's gonna do it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, those of you that tuned in. Again, this was my first time hosting an episode of the podcast, but this is not too unfamiliar from what I've done with FGC in the past. I do want to make it clear though that this will not be a customary thing from me. These podcasts will ordinarily be hosted by the actual staff members. I am merely a retired member, but I still want to see this community grow, and you know, I could not turn down an opportunity to host such a topic like this. And with that, is there anything else that you guys like to
Would
add
like to
very
note
quickly?
that retirement is only a social construct. One regret Beetle recently graduated as a graduate student from UCLA, not just an undergraduate, and he's still showing up to her meets. So anything can happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
I hear you. Norse, anything?
I actually, are you able to come to Fridays, or is it like your work that doesn't let you?
Okay,
I'm
the
just
trouble is
curious.
that I am 300 miles from UCLA, so
Oh no.
that's a bit difficult.
Yeah, that
In
would
what
definitely cause some
direction?
problems.
Yeah.
In what
Well,
direction?
in the north. I'm in the South Bay area. So,
Oh, okay. I
I
see.
do I do plan on coming when the opportunity arises, but for now
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have
It's a
to
bit far.
enjoy the community from afar, yeah.
Yay.
But
Okay.
hey, trust me, I love this community. When I say
Yeah.
retire, I
Oh
mean
no,
just
no,
from
no. Yeah, yeah.
organizing. Like I'm gonna be real, like organizing for this university club, probably the hardest thing about college, harder than anything in my classes, okay?
Oh.
CS at UCLA is hard, but I feel like you can just grind it out, put in the work, and it'll be fine. But running a college club and trying to run it well, not just running it, right? Not just like going through the motions, but running it well, growing it, trying to meet new people, gain new friends, get all the value out of it, difficult thing. So I don't envy you guys, but at the same time, I do think that you guys have the opportunity of your life. So please, please, while you're still in college, make the most of every opportunity and please enjoy it while you're still in there, because when life starts, or when life continues afterwards, I should say, it's nothing like the fun pastime of university. All right.
Sure.
I set a hard deadline for 2 hours, and we're at the 2 hour point in 3 minutes. So please, guys, anything else you'd like to add before we close this off?
Play Under Night.
Yeah, play Under Night.
Play
Yes.
Pluthar, play it multi.
Well, I
Multi's
cannot
I'll
great.
play
guarantee
XR2
things. Oh, sorry.
now that's getting or play XR2 now that's getting rolled back.
Oh, true, true, true. Play Sam Show. That is getting rolled back in 2023. Um,
Under Night's not getting rolled back, but still played anyway.
uh, I know
FGC
you
eating
Good
this.
guys.
game.
You guys all hate KOF matchmaking, but play KOF. I'm obligated to say that. And then also play BBCF.
Become just become a Discord fighter machine.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Do it. Okay. I think that's all. Cheers, guys. I really appreciate it. All those of you that watched. If you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Come on. Tell your friends to subscribe. We're at 140 right now.
I was right. This lineup is pretty stacked. You should have us all back on.
All right, later, guys. That's gonna be it.
Oh my god, I just ate hell. What am I doing?
It's the
Good session,
stream ended.
guys.
The stream ended, Godfried.